Hey guys, Magnet here, and I'm back for episode 8 of Starcraft Q&A. Got a handful of questions here, but I mostly wanted to do this to clear this out before I got a bunch of waves of questions for Legacy of the Void beta stuff, considering as of right now recording this, the video should be uploaded, so go check that out if you haven't looked at it yet, which basically outlines all the Legacy of the Void beta stuff that you'll need to know, and that's all there is to say. I'm pretty burnt out from the last video, but let's go ahead and get this done here. So somebody asks, let me get this sized up properly. Is a mineral line being mined to the max if there are 16 harvesters on it? And if so, why does it say 16 of 24? So it depends on the patches that are at the base. There's closer patches and there's further patches. If you have 16, that means there's going to be 2 on each patch once they all balance out. And that's mining that will be as efficient as possible, to a point where you can't get more efficient than that level of mining if there's 2 on each patch. Once you start adding workers beyond 16, your efficiency goes down, but your income still does rise, because there still is a tiny little bit of leeway for a worker to get in there and mine when the patch isn't occupied yet. So on the further patches, if you have 2 of them assigned, there'll be a break every other trip. So you'll have a worker mine, he'll leave. The worker that was waiting will replace him, he'll mine, he'll leave, and for just a couple seconds the patch is open to be mined. So I usually say somewhere around 18 to 19 we'll start to fill those holes in some of those patches without hurting your worker count too much, or rather hurting your supply count too much. Because if you ever get to a point where you just have too many workers, like if you have 24 on 3 bases, that's a lot. You'd be better off having a 4th base and not mining them all optimally. So I usually say about 18 to 19 is fine. 16 is being maxed mining in terms of efficiency, though, so you won't get more efficient than 16 no matter what you do. Same guy asks, why will a Widow Mine do less damage to another Widow Mine if it buries while it's targeting? I'm actually pretty sure that there is no friendly fire on Widow Mines from one to the other in either circumstance, so that was kind of an unusual question, but as far as I know, there's no splash damage Widow Mine to Widow Mine. And that's mostly because you could just blow up your whole army by just having Widow Mines yourself, and that would be kind of annoying if that happened. Okay, last question from the same guy. He says, is it hopeless to do good with Teran if you don't want to do split attacks and just keep the army together like Toss and Zerg? So it is true, if you want to play Teran Bio, you will have the most success by doing multiple attacks all the time, and that's because you're managing a whole bunch of cheap units. And whenever you're managing a bunch of cheap units, it's up to you to squeeze the efficiency out of those. Otherwise, just being able to just A-move with a bunch of cheap units versus a bunch of really expensive units seems kind of silly. So if you do want to do good with Teran, mostly with big balls of units, you probably want to run a mech. And I say this all the time, if you're having trouble with your control and stuff with Teran, try playing mech. You might like it a lot more. And it's when that typically has beefier units, a lot slower armies, and you get rewarded for having your whole army in one place versus being split up. So check out mech. Hello, Magnet. I'm a gold Teran mech player. Speaking of which, my 1v1 and all matchups is pretty much covered by your videos, but I usually prefer to play 2v2 or 3v3, and I've had a really hard time trying to find an opener and unit compositions to cover everything when we face mixed race combinations. My co-players are Zerg and Protos. Thanks for your work. So, I say this every once in a while, in that team games are not really balanced whatsoever, and they're not really taken all that seriously, so it's hard to find super good strategies. But if you ever watch pros play, in the very rare occasion that they do, they just try to kill each other as fast as they can, because you can abuse some really hardcore unit compositions, like Zergling Hellion is really common in team games. If you want to watch people that are good play team games, go look up the stream from an owner called Protech. I'm not sure if he still streams anymore, but he was basically the guy that hung his hat on, I'm the serious teams player and I play only team games and stuff like that, so check him out. If not, there was recently a tournament played, I can't remember the name of the tournament. It's like 2 versus Tournament or something like that. Look that up. It has a lot of good pro players that play on teams against each other, and you can look up some strategies that they play there. But otherwise, I would just try to open up with a lot of Hellions. They're really versatile in the early game. Make sure you have stuff to cover air, such as turrets, or maybe a Viking or 2 or something like that. And then you can play pretty aggressively with the Hellion Lean, considering it's so efficient. So that'll be good with your Zerg player. With your Protoss player, you can probably have them open with an Oracle or really fast Blink or something, just to try to keep them back in their base while you can take extra bases and kind of defend yourself pretty well against the stuff that would normally overwhelm really fast blink, like a lot of Stim Marines or a lot of Zerglings or something like that. This person says, hey, I was thinking that Protoss should have something similar to the Siege Tank in PvP when Legacy of the Void comes out, and this will be to keep Ravagers at bay, because if the Ravagers are on top of your army, then the Ravagers kill the gateway units, and then Roaches and Hydras destroy everything else. We should think about this a little bit differently, in the sense that if they're spending a lot of money on Ravagers, then they have a lot of supplies sank into stuff that relies on being really immobile. So actually Siege Tanks without the proper care are going to get wrecked by Ravagers pretty hard. If you want to counter Ravagers pretty easily, then I would say research Blink and stick on Blink for a long time, because you can completely nullify the usefulness of the Ravagers if you can just blink out of the point where they're casting their mortars, or whatever you want to call those. So yeah, Blink Stalkers are going to be really good against stuff like that. If not that, then you could go with things like Tempest, because Tempests are really fast now and it'll be easy to dodge those types of things. Otherwise, you're just going to have to find creative ways to do it. I think Oracle Stasis is going to have its place. Colossus are still going to be good. It's just going to be weird to start feeling all this stuff out. And I think it'll be to a point where if they're spending that much on Ravagers, they actually won't have a lot of gas left over for a lot of Hydras and a lot of Roaches. So they'll probably have to support with Lings at some point. So I think like Zergling, or rather not Zergling, Zealot-based strategies will be good against Ravagers if they're doing them in mass, because it'll be hard for them to, you know, bomb themselves, because they do hurt themselves if they do that. So there'll be a lot of different ways other than just sieging up and preventing them from approaching you that you can deal with Ravagers, but it's just time will tell for that kind of stuff. This person says, hey Magnet, great vids as always. I would like to ask if you will post another top 10 best StarCraft 2 games, or maybe a top 10 games of the week, month, or quarter. I would certainly love to see your understanding and insights of the matches. So I don't really talk a lot about like insights or understanding of those games, because they've already been casted at high levels. So I didn't post that for the insight and whatnot in the first place. I just posted it because nobody had ever done it before, and I thought I would try it out. But just that one video probably took me like 2 weeks to find all the games, edit them, get all the footage, all that stuff. It took me a long time for one video, and that video is almost an hour. Whereas if I record videos like this, or videos where I talk over replays and stuff like that, I can do them a lot faster. So I probably won't do another top 10 StarCraft games or whatever. Maybe a lot later, maybe when Heart of the Swarm ends, something like that, to kind of say these are the best games from Wings of Liberty, these are the best games from Heart of the Swarm, etc., etc. So maybe something like that. I don't know. I lean towards probably not, because I really don't like editing a lot of video. It takes forever, and it usually doesn't amount to the kind of return that I would want on it, but I don't know. I went from probably not to we'll see, so I guess we're on the upswing, right? So this guy says, Mr. 789, hello Magnet, in PvP I almost always go Immortal Archon, which is good, but when the late game comes around it becomes impossible to properly transition away from it without dying. What are your thoughts on the matter? I mean, go League if it helps. So yeah, Immortal Archon has an expiration date, and the expiration date is usually about when they get 6 Colossus. You just can't attack into them anymore. They just kill everything, and your Immortals will never get close enough to the Colossus, and you'll never be able to either out-upgrade them or out-efficiency them if they can just melt your Zealots and just go straight for the rest of your army and kill it pretty easily. So typically with Immortal Archon, you want to be really aggressive between that 2nd and 3rd base transition time, where they usually won't have a lot of Colossus. And if you can't be aggressive during that time, you want to start switching into later tech units, such as Tempest, for example, so you can start targeting down the Colossus before you even fight. I have some information on how to play that type of style in my Protos playlist. I forget the video. It may be scattered throughout a few of them, actually, so you probably want to check out like how to deal with Colossus in PvP or something like that. I made a video about that somewhere, but don't totally remember. But the point is that once they get up to about 6 Colossus, your unit composition has to change to Stargate units, otherwise you're just going to get mowed over pretty hard. So yeah, try to do that. This person says, this is a noob question! I've been playing StarCraft 2 for about 2 months now, and I was ranked first in Bronze for a while, but I don't know how to get into Silver League. Will it just put me in Silver if I keep winning, or do I have to leave the league and place again so it'll place me in a better league? So the whole thing with leagues is there's a number called your MMR, and your MMR is largely hidden from you so you can't see it. And it tries to put you against opponents that have similar MMR. So if you beat somebody with higher MMR than you, you get more points for your MMR, and theirs goes lower, stuff like that. The basic point is that there are thresholds that you have to meet with your MMR in order to be placed into a higher league. So there used to be numbers for it a long time ago, but I don't think anybody really knows or cares enough to figure out how that works anymore. The point being is that you will eventually upgrade leagues if you beat enough players from the next league at a reasonable rate. So like if you're beating silver players at like a 50-50 rate, it's reasonable to assume that you'll get promoted sooner or later. Yeah, so it'll happen eventually. Just keep playing and especially keep winning against higher level competition. This person says Cal Messias. It's an odd name. I'm trying to look at your picture. I can't tell what it is. Anyway, I'm a Teran player and I'm having problems spending my money and expanding on time, so it's 4 minutes too late to expand. I usually don't have enough minerals to make a second base before 5 minutes. I also have problems with spending my money. This may sound strange because I just said that I don't have enough for a second base, and that's because I'm sitting at one base with like 2 barracks, 1 factory, and 1 starport spamming units usually. Should I just go into a 1v1 and practice against a bot until I get it right? So this is more so like you trying to do two things at the same time. So 2 barracks, 1 factory, and 1 starport on 1 base is almost always meaning that you're just going to not expand and try to kill them with that type of production. If you want to expand faster, you have to be willing to sacrifice production, because you can't do everything at once. And this is probably a disconnect from people that just play the game for fun, and they don't see higher level players playing it all that much. So what I would recommend is go look out for really high level pro games and note the Teran builds that they run, because you're going to be surprised when you look at them, considering almost all of them expand at about 3 minutes. And they expand that way because they have different tools to either let them know if they're going to get attacked really early, or to put harassment in their base so that the opponent can't leave their base, which allows them to safely expand. So I'd really highly recommend watching either a lot of the videos I put out about Teran strategy and just noting the early game builds from all those. Even if I skip over it really fast, you'll be able to roughly tell the timings from the production tab and what the timer is in the game. But you typically have to choose as Teran. Either I'm going to expand really early off of like 1 to 2 barracks at the most, maybe a factory, or I'm going to put out all of my tech really fast and try to deal a lot of damage with that, and then expand on the account that if they expanded early, then I'm just going to even the low economies and play a low econ game. So I would look out for pro replays, or you can go on to sites like se2casts.com, which has a bunch of pro level games that are all casted and whatnot, so you can watch those too. Or if you have access to watch like GSL or the Star League or Pro League or anything like that, there's a lot of places that you could watch pro players play, and it'll really change your perspective on what you can do in the early game. This person says, in PvP, if we both go Stargate versus Stargate, how do I avoid Phoenix versus Phoenix? Is it still possible to macro after this, or is Blink my only option? So if you lose the Phoenix versus Phoenix battle, you're probably dead. Blink probably is your only option to transition if you don't want to play the Phoenix versus Phoenix battle. So you could either play it in the sense that if I win one Phoenix battle, then the game's over, I win. Or you could play it as, I'm just not even going to try, I'm going to switch as fast as possible, which means you have to throw down your Blink right away, you have to get it started right away, and you have to be ready to kill them on 2 bases, partially because you have to force them to continue to make Phoenix, thinking that they have to go down that route. So it's a weird thing to play, but there are games out there where that happens. And I think I even have a video about Phoenix versus Phoenix somewhere where I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was Trap or Zest, someone like that. And it was Phoenix versus Phoenix, and he tricked him, and the one player that won tricked the other one into thinking that it was going to be a long-term Phoenix versus Phoenix play. So the losing player just kept making Phoenix, thinking, oh, I need a lot of Phoenix, and then all of a sudden there was like 30 Blink Stalkers on his door, and he had no tools to defend that. So you need to kind of bait them into making Phoenix and then switch into Blink, or you just need to try to win the Phoenix Wars. The downside is that if they're smart and they realize what's going on, not smart, but if they're attentive and they realize what's going on, that they can switch into a lot of Immortals and your Blink play is going to be useless. So that's definitely a razor's edge in both conditions. So there's a big reason why I don't personally like playing Stargate PvP, and that's because getting into these types of situations sucks. And you can very easily lose games to inferior players just because you happen to get a bad break on build orders, or because your transition got scouted or something. So it's a pretty silly scenario, but Those are your goals, and if you want to win with the blink route, you basically have to make them keep producing Phoenix. So like you could make a second Stargate and just not produce off of it if they see it, and just transition really hard. There's a lot of options, but it all is very brutal and unforgiving. So this person says, this is the same guy. I think he already asked a question about how to handle his bio. No, this was the bronze to silver guy. That's right. This person says, I also find it really hard to micro and split my Banelings against, or split my Marines against Banelings. Is there any way I could deal with Banelings if I can't split them well? Not really. So the only option that Zerg really has to deal with a lot of Marines is Banelings, so that's all they can do. So if you don't want to play that game, well, your two options are either split your Marines, and if you don't want to, then you can just play Mech, like I recommended earlier. Mech is totally immune from Banelings, and if somebody just blindly goes Banelings against all your Thors and tanks and Hellbats, it's like LOL, you're just throwing your army away and mine's not even dead. So that's definitely an option as well. Look into playing Mech, or just watch videos and try to practice your Marine splitting. But Marine splitting is really hard. This person says, how about a Marine plus tank opening? Man, we're getting a lot of Teran questions today. How about a Marine plus tank opening? Does that usually work against Zerg, or it's not so mobile and can be easily countered with Banelings? There's a lot of problems with this. So if you dial back to Wings of Liberty, in Wings of Liberty, it basically that was your only option because they didn't have mines, and you did need a tool to deal with Banelings. So you can run a Marine tank type of build if you want to, but you have to understand that it's very fragile, especially if you lose tanks in silly ways. Like if you forget to bring a couple forward, or if the Mutalisks pick off a few, then all of a sudden you have no tools to deal with the Banelings. Plus, the siege tanks will probably get off 2 shots before the whole army is on top of you, if even that. And your targeting with your tanks has to be really good in order to get efficiency out of that, because if you're just hitting Zerglings, then you're going to hit 1 with Zerglings, and most of those Zerglings won't die to the splash. Then you're going to hit a second time, likely on Zerglings and your own army as well. Then all the Banelings are still alive, and they blow you up, and it's bad news. So Marine tank is pretty outdated. It's really only good against roach strategies, considering Stim Marines that with combat shields and upgrades and stuff do really well against roaches, and the tanks support super well, and you have a lot of room to play with. But against Banelings, it's pretty rough. I would stick to just mines, or again, like I've said a million times, play Mech if you really want to use tanks. Okay, I think this is the last one. This person says, my question's on the Zerg Inject cycle. And if you read ahead, you'll notice that I do cut it off because this is a super long question. But and it would probably go up to like right here on the screen. So I'd be like, let me answer your question. So I did shorten it, but basically they want to know, when I go on an inject cycle, what am I supposed to do, or what's most important to do between cycles? So if you talk about cycles in the sense that you have, I think it's 30 or 40 seconds, I can't remember for sure. Whatever it is, it's annoying because the queen always doesn't have enough energy if you do it perfectly, so that's annoying. I think it's 30 seconds. So if you can inject, spread your creep, and scout, all within a really short amount of time, those are your 3 most important things, because you need to, 1, have larvae to spend, 2, you need scouting and plenty of warning in case they're coming across the map and you don't realize it, and plus creep with all of your units benefiting from the speed makes a huge difference, so fighting on your territory is a big deal. And third being scouting. It's because with Zerg, all of your larva cycles are basically either going to be 100% drones or 100% units, depending on what the opponent is doing. So if your opponent is looking like they're going to be moving out soon, your larva cycles from then until you hold the attack need to be on units. If they're just sitting in their base and they're macroing, or maybe they're taking extra bases or whatever, your cycles basically need to produce 100% drones. So obviously after scouting, that would be your next thing, is how do I spend my larva that I just got finished? And you need to know what to spend it on. It either needs to be drones or it either needs to be units. It can't be a mixture of both. If you just do a mixture of both randomly, that's how you slow yourself down to a point where you just lose because you're not getting ahead as you should be with Zerg. So it's all about having stuff to spend. It's all about having knowledge. It's all about knowing what to do with your larva, is really what the larva cycle should be revolving around. As far as like building overlords and buildings and whatever, just put those in as you would see fit, so it wouldn't be like you need to pay attention to really building overlords at a certain time. You'll typically want to keep an eye on that as you get used to bringing the cycles through, so you could do something like once you figure out what's going on, you could spend all of your larvae on making drones or units or whatever, and then with the few larvae that come out between there, you could probably squeeze in some overlords there if you need to be prepared for the next time your larva finishes. So you could do overlords then. Building buildings is mostly just you being understanding of what you want to do and when you want to do it. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question, but those are the most important actions, and I would definitely look to try to minimize the time spent doing all those, because then you'll have, like 25 or 30 seconds between cycles to do whatever you want, which could be harassing, could be additional scouting, could be shutting down buildings with your overseers, could be all kinds of things. So the faster you can do that cycle, at least the beginning stages of that, of injecting, spreading, and scouting, then you're going to be in way better shape for everything else. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Kind of a shorter episode today, a mere 21 minutes. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to leave it down below. But as I said before, if you're watching this right now and you haven't watched the Legacy of the Void beta announcement, it's time to watch that. So look out for that, and I'm expecting a lot of those questions to start rolling in for the next Q&A, so I'll try to do one pretty soon. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for your support, and ask any questions if you have any. I'll see you next time.